Welcome to Spinning a Better Yarn. I've just got a few notes to help the session run smoothly. Sorry about that. We will be recording the presentation part of the session. So if you could keep your video and audio off during that time, that'll stop us accidentally recording you. When the presentation's finished, we'll turn off the recording. We'll stop recording and then we'll have a discussion. And if you could turn your video back on for that would be great. And then just unmute yourself when you want to talk. And I'll be putting more information about that in the chat.
Yamagarangiano, ngati yulichili, ngatu Ngempa Ngurampaka. Hello everyone, my name is Leslie and I'm on Ngempa country. I'd like to invite everybody to tell us what country they're on in the chat, if they feel like doing that, rather than do a welcome to country. I'd like to introduce Jaky Troy and Jacinta Tobin, who will be talking about Jeanie Bell's wonderful article, Language and Linguistic Knowledge, a Cultural Treasure, that was published in 2010. A very important article, and I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. Thank you.
So Warami na Jacinta Borongo Karamatigo Derek Dalang. My name's Jacinta Tobin. I come from the Prospect and Richmond people of this Greater Sydney region. And I'd just like to say hello. And Jacqueline, did you want to say hello?
Yes, Warami. Good to be here with Jacinta. I'm Ngaragu, but I grew up in Sydney for a chunk of my life. And I've had the privilege of being able to work with Jacinta and have her friendship for a couple of decades at least now. I think we've decided we're fessing up, we're older than 21. Everyone always does that, don't they? But anyway, and I'm fortunate also to have been able to work with Leslie Woods for a very long time, and also Felicity and Ruth. And I think there are many other people in the group today as well. And I think that's really where we're heading today with our discussion, is what it is to work with people, not to appropriate people's knowledge, but to actually have that sharing. And in that kind of spirit, I am going to ask Jacinta to really speak for us today. We're now colleagues at Sydney University. Who would have thought, hey, Jacinta, but it was always in my mind.
You were persistent, God love you.
So I guess I have a PhD in linguistics, and Jacinta's heading towards hers, and as is Leslie. I guess it's really great. There's going to be the Indigenous linguists cometh, and I say Indigenous because I've also got people from overseas who are Indigenous doing PhDs with me on linguistics. So I think that this is a great world for the whole world of linguistics. We've got so much good stuff ahead of us of working together, and that now that more of us are also getting these, I guess, complex qualifications in linguistics, which just adds another dimension to what we can do. But first of all, we love our languages, we love them together, and all the people who I think are in this grouping today also love our languages, or you wouldn't be here with us. Jacinta, Mari Nubadi to you. Big love.
Mari Nubadi, very go. So so we're going to talk about the paper that was, I just wanted to share a screen with you. First off, we've done a bit of a PowerPoint presentation. And I just need to maneuver you guys over this side.
Totally love this book, by the way. Anyone who doesn't have it, you can buy it from Jacinta Tobin.
No, I've got to get more copies made. I've just had a phone call for more. So
and it comes with a wonderful CD, so you can get down to Durrock.
So yeah, and this is following along from the article that we were, oh, sorry, one moment, I just need to open this up. Following along the article, oh, sorry, my screen. I need to open that up again. Can you see that well? Yep, can you see the screen, Jacqueline? The Get Down and Direct? Yep, okay, great, thank you. So there is reading Bell's work. It triggered me into understanding about being a community person, because I've the last time I was at uni, my old assignments are on floppy disks, so that may give you an understanding of the barack in the traffic. But it also triggered the understanding of working with community, and as you see here, Bell states in the language and linguistic knowledge, a cultural treasure 2020. Alongside the school-based program, reclamation and maintaining the different generations, ensure successful outcomes. The irony of it is that we actually have a decrease in, know if it's working, and I'd like to talk about the work I've been doing in the schools for over 20 years. Yeah, we're getting into decades now. And this is a little thing I put together, which was a get down and direct, because so many people were asking for language, and always been very apprehensive, because unfortunately, like not as blessed as others, we weren't brought up with the language or the culture in the traditional sense. I mean, there was hidden knowledge, I think is the words we're looking for. So we were taught as direct people some things, but we didn't know it was necessarily direct business. So one of the examples I use is my mother used to talk about the doo-one, the deaf bird. She didn't even know she was Aboriginal. And I said, Mum, how can you not know Aboriginal when you're using that kind of words? And she didn't realise it was an Aboriginal word. So this is how it happened in Sydney for our families. And so what I started to do in this Get Down and Direct has got about 10 songs and one music piece, so the children can actually be themselves and relax in the music, and they just have a time to dance. I'm grateful for linguistics in the fact that with Jacqueline's work and others, that somebody took the time to look at the old record to source the information and to bring it to the forefront, because now many of our families are using it, and I use it every day at home, but it's just casual talk, I suppose a pidgin type language at home. But the more we are doing, the younger ones they just know it like that now. And so it's been picked up. And I've always found that song is one of the easiest ways I remember language. And so what I've tried to do is put these songs together so then the children have just basics, and we've also mixed the inland and the coastal, because just the lack of language that was available to create this sort of experience. One of the parts in the Get Down and Direct is the animal corroboree, and my brother Chris did a beautiful artwork associated with it. And it's about teaching the children that they have to sit and wait so they get to show off, but then they have to sit and wait and watch someone else show off. And it's teaching those things, because quite often in 21st century, I find we have this this belief system that that your world's your oyster, but in culture, it's not set up that way. So there's the argument that Bell puts forward is that there's still that mistrust in communities, and I understand that too, because sometimes it feels like, and Jacqueline and I have had many conversations about this, and we will talk about this more, is sometimes I feel writing the language is actually a form of colonizing our language, because I'm a big believer in you know, that the vibration and frequency is the more important part than the actual writing down, because we have family members who actually have fights over how you're going to spell something. And that's just really sad to see families actually find themselves in that situation when really spelling wasn't even a part of our existence. So as I've said in here, it's better than nothing that at least things have been recorded. Yeah, and so we're grateful for that work, and grateful for Jacqueline to have done that in the start, because it was definitely something that helped us get through and become stronger in culture for ourselves. This oh, by the way, that artwork was done by my brother. The design was done by Tony Hearn, and this is my sister's artwork, Leanne Tobin, and I'm very proud of my family. I think I should have been the artist, because the musician is still singing for a supper, but the artist seemed to be a little bit more profitable. But when approaching any of the programs, there's always a bias for Aboriginal people to work with the system. And this is going back to what I was talking about in the first slide, is I'll read, yet in the true forms of respect and reconciliation, one would naturally have to learn the different laws that govern each area. This would be a clear path to understanding and being guided by those who have a deeper relationship with country they are from. Centuries of watchful eyes on country, learning its signals and signs, creating songs and dance to use as a tuning fork. This is decolonisation in its finest. Now, I say that because even within my own family, sometimes we forget that others have actually been on that country for a lot longer. And having that relationship with a country is a very different thing than being somebody not living on your country, and no offense to anyone. But it does bring responsibilities, because, and then you'll see in that next part, it's only 24% are on their homelands. I wish we had homelands here in Sydney. We have the largest Aboriginal population in Australia in direct country, and yet we don't have a homelands or anywhere for those children to learn. And so we quite often open our homes to strangers constantly, and it's probably not the best thing for our families, but how else are we going to share the culture? We don't have a gathering place that you can come to. We have some places that are rented that we have to ask for the key before we go in to hold a meeting. And unfortunately, I've just been at Surrey Business today, so it's a bit unusual to be talking after such a tender time. But again, the family were saying, how come we only gather for funerals? And this is, so a homelands would be super important. And we're only 20% of the non-remote areas that actually still live in country. So those who are still based from country, it's important to touch base with those people. And this artwork, to me, just, I run to the mountain, which is sad, because my mum's still on the plains, and the family today were talking about the constant growth in country, in indirect country, and the lack of control we have for that. But this is where this Bell talks about the conflict between the people with the degrees and ourselves as academics, and I'm trying to understand. I'm an academic now. I'm not somebody at the other side of the fence, but I still have the pull from the community. And as Jacqueline quite often pulls me up and says, you know, you've got to actually, you're doing academia now. You need to pull away from because you get caught up in the politics of home. But the politics of home, that the language come from country. So to be a true linguist, you still have to, for me, I have to connect to country. So I've been blessed, but with all the rain, and we're saying the prayers for Hawkesbury. And actually I see a cousin online, and I'm putting my forms out for Erin and other family members who are actually in the Hawkesbury just waiting currently. And this is where I believe in language. I believe that language is actually, when I speak my language, I'm massaging the country. The ancestors are yearning to hear it. And sometimes we find the more language we do, we seem to get this stronger presence of our ancestors with us in those forms of language. So part of this research is that I'm hoping to do is to revitalise the songlines. This next is about defending country, is the actual name of the art piece that Leanne has done. And language goes beyond what we use orally. And so this, as I said, with the distrust with the universities and the communities, and the tensions relate to what control communities have over their language, and unequal power relationship between Indigenous and non-Indigenous linguists. I'm fortunate enough to have Jacqueline as my supervisor, so we don't have that because we're both Indigenous women. But I've had to do some battles with myself, and then also to go in to justify. I couldn't justify just giving people a voucher or a voluntary pay. You know, we need to actually be real about what community needs, because quite often I've been on the other side of the fence where people come in with great ideas, but it's not what the community are asking for. And I think that's where that mistrust comes from, is that, like, truly the reason I'm at university, because I do understand as a community worker for over 20 years now, that it's only those with the degrees who actually make the change in my community areas. And when elders talk about the language and the lack of control, see, the thing is, the word lists are terrific, but there's a depth to our language that is being lost in a word list, is being lost in I've never done and Jacqueline was with me with the Sydney Festival, and I think I just saw Cameron come on. I think I've got to flick through, but hi Cameron, if you are. To do the language classes, I wouldn't just do it as a word list or this is the language for this, because for me, it's a much deeper process, the language. When you think of buru, 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 that's the sound of that kangaroo hitting the ground. That's part of the vibration and frequency. And for me, this is the truly important part of the language. And language to me is not just about our verbal. We feel country. We know when to go in, and where does that sit in with the understanding with a linguistic process and the community base of that understanding of language and the deeper connection to the language. Don't know if Jacqueline wants to add to that, but we'll talk about an experience Jacqueline and I had in further slides. One of the things when we're talking about decolonisation, and Bell talks about Tuwali Smith's work, and the fact that to decolonise our thoughts. I was just looking at how many public monuments there are in Australia. The number of public monuments currently recorded is 37,906. And literally count how many Aboriginal memorials there are. Unfortunately, then there actually are Aboriginal languages. And so how can we decolonise a university setting or linguistics or something like that when everything in our environment has been really purely based on someone else's culture, but not the culture from country? And so, yeah, so it's a big process, and I'm so grateful I'm at university at a time when we're talking about these things, because I think I would have had a lot of trouble times past. And the fact, again, as I said, thank God someone did do these recordings, because some of the languages have now declined or not even spoken. But too, as Darug people, we've been told we've been extinct before today. We've been told our language is dead. And yet, ironically, the world speaks my language. People come here for a boomerang. They all watch Bondi Beach on TV and silly things like that. But that's the beauty of language too, is that it has travelled right across the world. and our ancestors are still very strongly here in country, and we feel them. And part of the revitalisation of the language is also to help the younger ones reconnect in a fashion. So it stood out to me about the monuments, the fact that we do this and we still don't realise that that there's so much of our history or completely ignored, especially in Sydney. It's been quite horrific to see the amount of, I would say, ignorance maybe, but it's definitely been a complete, I call it whitewash of our history, actually, is the word I tend to use, and that we were just sitting here waiting for people to come and take our country. And so this is where language has been super important, and children want to connect. One thing that I'm very, very grateful for is that when I'm in the schools, the kids love it. The kids want to connect. The kids, even when I was walking with people around the crossing of the Blue Mountains, most of the children were asking about our Aboriginal history, not necessarily the gentleman who followed a songline, because the Great Western Highway is an old songline. So the explorer thing is maybe not as clear as it's made out in our history. This is up at my brother's camp on the mountain, on top of actually Darling Causeway, which is like the top last section of the mound before you head down to the Radri or to the Darkinjung areas. And they're our neighbours on that area, and the Gunungara on the other side. And this is a camp that my brother has. Actually, I forgot to put Lex's dad's name up, but Lex cut the coolamon, and my brother did the artwork in the tree. Even the fact of cutting the coolamon has put a vibration and a frequency in that tree, and yet we don't think of a tool making process as a form of language. But I'm pretty sure to the tree, it's a language that has stuck with it for a long time. So Bell gives us, provides an insight into the struggle of being an insider-outsider research. Both Jacqueline and myself are insider researchers, but Jacqueline also has been an outsider researcher. So maybe Jacqueline, I don't know if you want to talk about this, because it was something I had an interesting thing that I went to go and visit some of the elders who were Wiradjuri elders, and I was saying about my research. And for the first time, I got treated like a university student. and it was, oh, wow, they didn't even, and so there was a part of me that's a traditional woman who was saying, hey, I come here, I brought gifts, I was invited. So I have to put down my tribal business, because if I was tribal, I would have been a little bit more in their face about how I wasn't approached, you know what I mean? So that was an interesting thing for me to feel as an outsider researcher. So Jacqueline, I don't know if you want to talk.
Yeah, I think that's a good moment for me to make a comment. And I do remember being at this place. You took me to your brother's camp and after the fires in February 2020, and it was extraordinary to see how it survived. The camps that, the camp itself survived, this tree survived, and the artwork on it wasn't destroyed. And for me, it's interesting, because as you say, you stand there as another Aboriginal person, or I do, and but I also I'm looking in awe at somebody else's culture and their environment, but I'm invited in by you. So I think that that's a really key point you're making, is that we should never forget Aboriginal people. I know there are a lot in this audience today studying linguistics or involved in language work. We must always respect that first and foremost, we as Aboriginal people are Aboriginal, and we come bringing that I guess cultural connection. I'm not of Jacinta's group, language group, clan group, Burrabarongal and your other clan group.
We used to call ourselves Wamali, which means many possums, but that's they Kanamedigal. Yeah,
And I'm from owls who actually eat possums, which is kind of. But I forbid
keep that in mind.
I forbid my owls from eating your possums.
Thank you.
So you know, and that's actually a good metaphor in some ways, I think, for the relationship. You know, on my own country, I'm responsible for a small river fish and the Kosciuszko galaxia, also the Stocky galaxia. There's two of them. And there's a galaxia that comes from further down into Wiradjuri and Ngunnawal country that is now potentially going to climb up into my country and eat my fish. And, you know, it's an interesting, that's what I think we need to watch out for, is that I don't want me as a linguist to eat Jacinta's language. You know, this is not my role. My role is to support and assist. And when I wrote that book about the Sydney language, even many years ago, as I started it as an undergraduate, actually doing my honours work at Sydney University, and then continued it when I was doing my PhD at ANU. But I always had this feeling that I couldn't even really name the language or call the language by a name. First, I couldn't find a name in the historical record that Jacinta's mob had called it. And shout out to Cameron, who was in a meeting this morning with me. This will be resonating a lot with Cameron. We've just come from a meeting about Sydney University kind of wanting to make policy about language naming. And I was like, you actually can't do that. It's really up to the people themselves to make their own policy if they want policy, you know, but this is Aboriginal business. This is not university business. So, but it's great to work with universities and to work with technical expertise. But in the end, language is really Aboriginal business or Torres Strait Islander business or Indigenous business wherever we are in the world. And so that's the role I take on. I'm from the academy, the university. I'm a linguist. I'm not of Jacinta's or Cameron's clans of the Sydney area. It's not for me to name them or make policy or dictate how their language will go into the future. That it's for them. But if they need assistance with maybe aspects of how their language worked classically, if you like, I'm happy to give that advice. And I've just wondered at the difference between when I was writing that first piece and it got published, and my statement in it was, I hoped this book would revive interest. I think I even used the word extinct language of Sydney. And I wrote that with you can imagine the sorrow I felt. You know, the thing that drew me into Southeastern Australian languages was I couldn't believe that I don't speak my own language. And it's taken me until really the last few years to actually turn my gaze to my own language and feel confident to work with my own community, because I feel in some ways like an outsider, insider with my own community as well, because I've come through the university system. I think the difference now is that Indigenous people all over the world, like Jacinta, and I'm hoping Cameron too, I keep pushing, don't I? This is how Jacinta ended up doing a PhD, by the way, Cameron. One of the reasons I kept humbugging her until she just gave, no, Wendy, she really wanted to do this, Bial, as I should say. You know, you put yourself in this position of being, even with your own community as an academic, an outsider. It's a really strange experience because people think somehow that having a Western style education puts you in a category of having somehow given up your community base. And it's a very lonely, uncomfortable place to sit in. And I think that this will be addressed by so many people now coming to the academy and getting these qualifications, going through the universities, but working still together as an Aboriginal collective, you know, an Indigenous collective with our international scholars as well. And I think that what Jacinta's done for me is brought me into her collective, and that gave me the, I'll say courage to engage with my own language and feel that I had I have a role in supporting my own community to do something that they very clearly now really want to be doing. I mean, there are Ngaraku people in Victoria and down on the South Coast who have made some starts. Some people talk about family members who still speak language, but up in the high country, up in the top of the mountains where my people are from, that's been a long, I will say, extinguished but not extinct discussion. And now I'm helping to renew the practice of language, encouraged by my sisters, Leslie as well. Leslie and I have had long discussions, and Jacinta. So I think that's, for me, this strange world of, it's not like the white and the black world where I feel like I'm going through sliding doors. You know, one door shuts and you're in this all white academy, and then the door opens and you're in the all black Indigenous world, Aboriginal community world. It's kind of like like there's a fly screen or something filtering it. You know, it's that sort of sliding backwards and forwards. But I think supporting, each of us supporting each other, and that's Indigenous and non-Indigenous, is the way to make sure that Indigenous people feel comfortable doing language research, and that the people who aren't Indigenous get access really to what we think and what we care about, because in the end, that's really all that matters. You know, it's for us to make our own decisions about our languages.
I had a beautiful experience today. I wrote a song for the aunt that passed, and in our way, not to mention her name. So I was able to say Budjari Jin or Jin Budjari, good woman, you know, because also too, I was taping one of the uncles the other day, and he was talking about how boom is our word for but. That was his understanding. And that the non-Indigenous people got hold of it and then made it derogatory. And it was a joke for us as family members to say that to each other, but it became derogatory term. And same with the word yin. And so we're taking language back and we're saying, no, this is not a derogatory term. This is actually our language and we're proud of it. And so I got to sing it. And the best part about singing it today was I knew that there was a whole group of them and young kids. Oh, well, they're now parents. But the younger generation knew exactly what I was saying when I sung that word. And then I sang a song that we wrote, and actually my cousin Cindy's in the next room, but it was a Wirrawee Bubawoo, and all the women got together and those who knew, and they started to sing the song with me today. So to have a collective of family singing for that one who's just passed was so emotional, and but pride emotion, you know. It was a really beautiful thing, and I think that's the blessing of the language and the gratefulness we have of linguists like yourself, Jacqueline, and others who have actually gone and recorded, Dawes being one of the first, of course. But again, as I said, there's a part of me that's quite funny about the fact that we're writing it down. Is this a form of colonisation? Is this a form over to others and not having that depth? But that's hopefully a conversation that we'll have after this talk. I'll go to the next slide, Jacqueline, because I think this is one that I'd love you to... I had a lot of signs and signals that I was told about this time from my Auntie Gladys Smith, who brought us up, not telling us we're Aboriginal, but I now know that a lot of things she taught me were actually Aboriginal things. But this is this beautiful time that I was blessed to go down with Jacqueline to her country and learn her language and learn to sing in Jacqueline's language. So Jacqueline, would you like to just...
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that was quite, so that was and that was another moment, yeah, where I guess the thing flipped for me. So as you say, Jacinta, I'd always been, I guess, particularly focused on Jacinta's own language, but to introduce Jacinta to my language, felt like in some ways life going in a full circle, that, towards the end of my academic career, here I am being mentored into feeling courageous about engaging with my own language. And as I said, I honestly want to say Leslie Woods, in her journey with her language, Nyampa, has also influenced my thinking, and she's always encouraged me to turn my gaze to my own language. So these are pictures from my country, of course. It's the snowy mountains. It's most of my own area is all above the snow line, and so this little grouping of quartz worked by my people over thousands and thousands of years is near Dalgety, which is in the snow, above the snow line, and not above the tree line. Above the tree line is the people from right above the tree line, actually my mother said, are now all gone, and there's just their moiety there, the crows. So we are crow and eagle hawk, and there are crows everywhere up top, but unfortunately nobody who now identifies with the clan that was at the highest up. And so these resonated for Jacinta, these quartz crystals, because of course quartz is a very important mineral for Aboriginal people all over Australia, and the area that I come from, the Snowy Mountains, is absolutely based on quartz and granite, and because it's been glacial country. So Jacinta found one piece in particular that she can talk about, and I was able to say, please take it. It's gifted to you from my country to go back to your country. And it's kind of an embodiment of the frozen water, because as Jacinta explained to me, these kinds of crystals they have the memory of water in them or something like that. But so we have these cultural discussions. It's never just about language. I sang the snow song and with Jacinta, and with my daughter and cousin and other researchers from Sydney University. And within 2 days, it snowed, and it kept snowing. It's still snowing. It hasn't stopped snowing since April last year when we sung this song. And next weekend, we're going to be doing it again down in the mountains. Jacinta, I hope you got the invitation. And Cameron, if you want to come along, you're very welcome. I just realized that Leslie, I've already said to Leslie, but I don't think she's trucking out from Western New South Wales. But so if we get another big dump of snow, then it will be absolutely confirmed in my mind that the power of using our language in song. This is a snow increase ceremony song that I was able to recover from the historical record and work with Linda Barwick to find the sound of it again, and by cleaning the musical score of all the Europeanness. And in fact, when it was cleaned of all that sort of flourish, Linda said it looked exactly like a Southeastern Australian corroboree song, very predictable. And the language I was able to analyze using, you could say, my cultural knowledge of country. And when I was able to use historical records to get a few key words in the text, and then it all came together. It's repetition, of course, reduplication, which is what people use in these kinds of pieces of music, calling, snowing, calling out to the moon, which we call gaba. In fact, when I was out in Wiradjuri country, and also talking to the Nyampa people, Leslie may or may not be able to confirm this for me, but a man who's both Nyampa and Wiradjuri, mainly Nyampa, said that gabada is a word for moon. So I suspect that's probably the same item. I'm not sure, but gabada, I may, there may be
Yanada.
Ganada. I think that's from
Yanada for us.
Yeah, Yanada. But so, yes, Yanada. So anyway, so what we do when we're as Indigenous Aboriginal people together talking about language, and with these skills that we've developed through studying linguistics, we can have these really complicated discussions about what the words might sound like, what their meanings might be, but it's always embedded in our cultural knowledge and our family knowledge and our community knowledge. And it's always a great thing to be able to bring other people who aren't Aboriginal, who from our communities, into that discussion and help people, because everybody in that trip when we did this snow song really felt it, didn't they? They were mostly musicologists, but they're
and the people who own the land too, they were
people who
quite
own the
shocked.
property, yeah, that
They
on
brought
the
people to
bend
have
of
a
the
look at
Snowy
us.
River. Yeah, they were a bit overcome by it. And this site that's on their block, oh, Gabada, yeah, there you go. So that's what he was saying, Gabada. So we have Gaba or Gaba. So that's the same word up in my country, Leslie. Probably has that other, might be morphology or a longer word, I'm not sure, but anyway, so this site is on the property owned by the people who gave us access to performing the song on the bend of the Snowy River, Gunama, Namaji area, Snowy Mountains, when I was round about this time last year. So watch out for big snowfall. It's going to freeze up all this rain, and you're going to end up ice skating on the Hawkesbury River, Jacinta.
Yeah. My mother last year actually asked me to tell Jacqueline, stop singing that song because it's too bloody cold.
And my mother said, keep singing, we'll have powder to ski on. Well, she doesn't anymore, and I did. So, yeah.
And so the quartz that Jacqueline, and also I was blessed for Jacqueline to gift to me to take home, and I hold it in a very special place, is the milky quartz. And what has happened is water has been trapped within that quartz. See, to me, this is the science. Our language is not just language for language sake. It was a language that was helping us to communicate with nature and nature to communicate with us. And so for me to actually be singing that song in that area and having a quartz that holds water to sing for snow, to me is just common sense. And so the language for me is about, I think in pictures more than I think in words. And so when I think of a sound coming out of our mouth, I think of the vibration that is happening from our mouth. I think about our electromagnetic field and I'd love to go on the land and do electromagnetics and see what's going on that country, Jacqueline, because it'd be really interesting to see if the magnetic field does a little thing there. And so the quartz, to have the water attached to it, to me, was about putting a vibration into the quartz. And it had to be at a certain time. We were a little bit late for the moon cycle, but it was to be on which moon cycle? On the full moon, Jacqueline, and the first dew?
Yes, it was sung. The man who documented it was a man called John Lotsky, who came through my country in 1834 and camped on this bend of this river that we were able to identify from his. I've written a paper with Linda Barwick if anybody wants to read it. Not sure if I can put the link in here, but in Musicology Australia, but. So it was late March actually, but each year this moon cycle is slightly different. So there'll be a full moon again at the end of this month, as everyone who's following Ramadan will know. So that's the full moon. And I think it's because, and women, I found a reference to say that women sing corroboree song in the southeast at night. So that was interesting. But anyway, it was sung under the full moon in late March by women sitting on the banks of the Snowy River, calling to the moon to bring the snow. And at that time of year, you get this frosty moon. And another linguist who's worked on my language, Harold Koch, said this was completely unanalyzable. And, maybe he's right and I've just made this all up, but it's compelling that the language in the text, it does match. He's looked at the same word list that I have, but as Leslie's just confirmed, Gabada is moon in Yimpa, well, Kaba, possibly Gabada, I don't know. It depends, because these, of course, are documents written down by non-Aboriginal people hearing something. But he, it's very compelling. Yeah.
The fact it worked to me.
And the fact that it worked.
Yes.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so for me, my interest is because of 2019, 2020 bushfires and living in the Blue Mountains, we are in such sorrow for what was lost. And so for me, it's extremely important for us to learn to find out when and what time and on what part of the songline do we sing for to increase life forms. And to see this to me was just, and also I as I said, my auntie Gladdy told me signs and signals along the way that I had to keep my eye on. Ironically, it was that weekend that I got my first, and I taped her. I've got her on tape in 2006. And yet, and to keep an eye out for a little red-breasted robin, believe it or not.
Oh, we saw the robin too. That's right.
And
All
that's
these.
right. And we saw the red-breasted robin.
Yeah.
And I'd waited to 2006 to see a red-breasted robin. And it just happens to come on the weekend that we sing. And I know this might seem, how is this to do with linguistics? It is, because it's about deepening our respect for language. It's about deepening language and what magic we truly can do with voice, with right intent, because always we must have right intent. Was one of my number one lessons from my auntie. So I was honoured to do this and to have, as I said, the vibration and frequency relate to country, seasons and stars, because also too it is as above so below in our way of knowings. And so to have that represented with the moon, and also I was an old fishing woman, and I was young fishing woman. Now I'm an old woman. But when I was fishing and being the only woman on the boat, we as women fought to the cycle of the full moon. Now, so you've got women, and women may have separated themselves from the mob because of that time, doing songs for snow, which is women's business water. To me, it all makes sense. I love it.
So it's this, what I think you can hear from the conversation that Jacinta and I are having, and Leslie's popped in with her comment in the chat about this word that she has in her country too. This sort of sharing of cultural knowledge that goes. What we're doing even now is yarning. I was talking with my student from Northwest Pakistan, and friend, I should say too, yesterday about yarning, and they have gubshop, which is the idea of sitting around yarning. You just talk, and in doing this, you gather information, but also the kind of yarning we do is this comparative cultural comparison that I guess really a non-Indigenous linguist can't really do, even if they've got a deep knowledge of the community they're working with, and they've been doing ethnography with the community for a long time. There's still this kind of just testing things out with each other. So in my case, an unanalyzable song is analyzable, and it actually fits perfectly to the music when it's morphologized the way I did. So, it could be entirely fanciful, but it works, and it works on every level. So
yeah. And that's where too that fanciful talk is sometimes when we're talking about that Indigenous and non-Indigenous power struggle. This is what happens. We always sort of feel like we have to apologise for our ways of knowing as Indigenous people, and that's where I'm encouraging that we don't have to apologise. This is just how we learn. We learn differently, and it's not better or less. It's just different. And when Jacqueline was talking about the bushfires, I don't know if you can see it in the background. In the background, you see everything's blackened. This is my brother's camp. And I took Jacqueline. This is from those photos when we went up, Jacqueline. Yeah. And by the way, the Jaky lizards turned up again for me. So I'm going to find out more about this. But the idea that through cool burns, the camp, Chris would also the treading on the soil stops the fire. But it's about this connection to country, and so not one piece of his bedding was burnt, and yet all around the camp was burnt out. In the green spaces, the cool burn technology was practiced in this area. And this is the area I'm hoping to look at to understand my songlines from country and our responsibility to country. Aboriginal people are constantly ignored in Australians' colonial faces, and the absence of the original science or land management that had sustained all life through ice ages. We didn't just get a voice in Parliament, I think we should actually be taken out of the political football. And maybe I shouldn't have written this, and I maybe should have gone over it with you, Jaky, but I just feel like our environment and ourselves as Aboriginal people are not part of politics. We have been here way before politics started. And I think it would be a wonderful solution to long-term solutions, because we're, you know, people, as I said, in the elections come and go. We have made many relations, because the idea for us as Aboriginal community people, I'm not as an academic now, is that we build a relationship with a minister, we build a relationship with a government, but then they come and go. And this is where, as academics, I would hope that our core business was to help our communities to actually have some more even playing fields. And I put this up to show the evidence of a lived experience instead of just a studied thing, because my brother lives at that camp when he can. He can't stay there all the time, because I don't know if you realise there's a law where he can be jailed for 20 years if it's seen as a political move. So this is about language and actually finding the language to manoeuvre ourselves as community people and Aboriginal people and academics to actually help all people in the long run, and our country ourselves. So I'd like to thank you for having this time and having time out with us to talk. But this is to me, as you can see, no, he doesn't live under sticks. He actually, there's a teepee that went around there, a canvas, and I didn't put the other photo in, but he actually has like a little gunya built there too, and even the gunya made of sticks and paper bark and things like that didn't burn. So you have to ask yourself, how can this happen unless there's a special connection? That and part of that process is there's dance circle there's a yarning place, and it was a place that I could take visitors to, which Jacqueline was one of them. So this is
the ground was still hot around his camp. It was amazing that how it survived. But as you said, it's a bit like the snow song, making it snow. So this sort of the power of language on country and using language on country. And this is something that it's certainly one of the things that really keeps me working with language. And I just realized, of course, we've got Tula Wynyard here, who's Jacinta and Cameron. I don't know if you have met, but Tula is of your mob and is analysing the language at the moment as well. But she's all the way down in Melbourne, I believe. So I just wanted to note that there is another Sydney mob person. Hey Tula, I see her.
And Aaron's there too.
Oh,
Warami.
Oh, right, that's great.
Good to talk. And that's what I'd encourage, is the family to talk up. Hey Aaron, did you turn yourself off to say hello? Warami.
Warami, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Did you go? So I didn't get to see the chats because I was sharing my screen, so I apologize. I didn't see anything that was going on there. So I'd love to, is this the time that we open and ask for others to speak, or?
I think so. And I think we start off by asking particularly the Aboriginal members of the audience and other Indigenous members of the audience to comment, ask questions first.